So, SpongeBob SquarePants is inarguably the most successful cartoon in the history of ever. I mean, nothing even really comes close. SpongeBob is basically the undisputed king of children's cartoon shows. That, despite there being a lot of similar cartoons at the time that were sort of treading the same ground as SpongeBob, like Ed, Ed and Eddie, Fairly Odd Parents, and especially Rocko's Modern Life. I mean, SpongeBob can basically be considered a spiritual successor to Rocko's Modern Life. Despite all that competition, though, SpongeBob came out on top. It won the Saturday morning cartoon arms race. And I'm not going to get into why that's the case. I think there are a lot of contributing factors that led to SpongeBob achieving the ultimate victory. But regardless, that's not what this video is about. This video is about the after effects of that ultimate victory. You see, as SpongeBob was getting more popular, there was another thing going on. The internet was getting really fucking big. I'm not kidding when I say that I don't think SpongeBob would be anywhere near as big as it is now, if not for the internet. I mean, it has a stranglehold on internet humor with hundreds of memes, possibly thousands, being made of it per day. And the kids who watched it when they were growing up, like me, are now all grown up and chronically online. But all that popularity is a double-edged sword. For as long as time, there's always been crazy people. It's one of those constants, like death and taxes. And when crazy people meet fandom, you get crack fiction, crack pairings, and of course, cracked out fan theories. And that latter one is something that SpongeBob fans have a weird predisposition for believing. I mean, skin theory is total bullshit, and it's so popular and so many people believe it. For some reason, SpongeBob is a magnet for crazy fan theories, and I'm here to insert a bit of logic into this situation, because over a series of 3 or 4 videos, I'm going to be exploring and debunking some popular SpongeBob fan theories. Just like I did with skin theory, except I'm doing it again, and more. And today's theory is the Spongehenge theory. A theory posited by one Karsten Runquist. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong, but it's whatever. And I would recommend you go watch the video, because I'm going to be cutting out some parts, just to keep it concise. So go watch the video, links in the description, and it's only like 11 minutes, so. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So this theory hinges on the episode Spongehenge, and prior to watching this video, I had never seen that episode. I must have missed that one when I was a kid. So, in preparation for this, I watched it, and this was my overall thoughts when I was done.
The fuck was that bullshit? That shit was retarded.
But you might not have watched it. And luckily, the guy, after his intro, gives a summary. And so I'm gonna play that in full, just for context or whatever. So, yeah, if you don't want to watch that, because you already watched the video, skip to this time code on screen. Alright.
The episode starts with 2 restaurant goers leaving a diner with takeout, when all of a sudden they notice a heavy gust of wind. The one fish claims it's Neptune, the god of the sea in Roman mythology, and the other claims everyone knows Poseidon is the ruler of the sea, which according to most websites is the actual truth, and is also the god of the sea for Greek mythology. At the end of the day, the wind blows away the fish's takeout food, and he screams, "Why, dear Neptune?" The leftovers fly over the city until they hit SpongeBob in the face. He licks them up and recognizes that it is indeed goulash. Now, goulash was an oddly specific choice for the writers to use, and I looked up the symbolism behind the dish, and I got nothing, it's just goulash. But in the process of tossing out the goulash, SpongeBob discovers a sound that the wind makes in his holes. It doesn't take long for this music to reach a jellyfish, who instantly grows pretty attached to Sponge. And by attached, I mean attached. He crawls into SpongeBob's head and swarms around his brain until the morning. But come the morning, the jellyfish doesn't want to leave. In fact, he sends over a swarm of jellyfish that prevents SpongeBob from being able to go to work. He's eventually dragged into work via a hook by his boss, Mr. Krabs, only to show up to work pretty much dead. But he isn't at work for long because the jellyfish swarm the Krusty Krab and take him away. So now his work is gone, so where to next? Patrick's house, where the jellyfish actually sting Patrick and leads to Pat kicking out SpongeBob for being a negative influence. What a terrible friend, to be honest. So SpongeBob is forced to leave society, and he crawls into the one place they can't find or hear him, a cave, where he sits out for years and constructs a stone replica of himself using a rock and eventually grows that facial hair he always wanted. Then he gets the idea to use that rock, but bigger versions of it, to lure the jellyfish away from him. He essentially recreates Stonehenge, he goes back to Bikini Bottom, and the world is gone, a reference to the Planet of the Apes. Flash forward another few thousand years, and aliens have taken over and are still examining these strange rock figures, and that's the end of the episode. And that's a pretty dark ending, no? I think this episode is definitely one of the show's most unsettling, like I said, as far as how it leaves you.
And this part is really just, like, my opinion more than anything, but if we're talking about, like, scare factor of a SpongeBob episode, like, which SpongeBob episode is the scariest, I think the title, hands down, would have to go to Squidward and Clarinet Land. That one scared the shit out of me as a kid.
For one, canonically, it assumes that those last moments were the last that Bikini Bottom saw of SpongeBob, and the last that we saw of Bikini Bottom altogether, which is pretty depressing considering Patrick's last words were that he was a negative influence, and that Mr. Krabs spent his last moments reeling him in, abusing the poor lad. And SpongeBob just kind of disappeared and went crazy, and we're to assume he just went crazier and eventually died alone. And as soon as I learned that this was episode 99B, that's when it hit me that this is most likely just the last SpongeBob episode.
Okay, a lot of things. Number one, what's this number connection? 99? What, because it's 100 minus 1? Is that significant? It's probably just a coincidence. And number two, in my last SpongeBob debunking that I did, one of the arguments that I used a lot was that all SpongeBob episodes exist in a vacuum. And I didn't really elaborate what I meant by that, and I really should. So here's what I mean. There is no continuity between SpongeBob episodes. There's a TV tropes page for this sort of thing. It's called Negative Continuity. And let me read from it very quickly. Quote, "Not only is there no established continuity, but the show is free to completely wreck the continuity and be assured of a full reboot by the start of the next episode. Burned a hole in your favorite outfit? Don't worry, it'll be better next episode. Burned down your house? No worries, it'll be back next time. Turned into a frog? Died? Destroyed the universe? No problem. If one episode ever continues from the last, it's only because it's part of a storyline too long for just one episode. Don't expect any apparent changes from the previous episode to be recognized outside of that specific storyline." End quote. That is SpongeBob. And if you still think that the episodes have some continuity or they're just out of order or whatever, then let me ask you this. How the fuck did all the residents of Bikini Bottom survive 2 thermonuclear explosions in the episodes Dying for Pie and The Krusty Plate respectively, as well as being crushed by a giant fucking worm in the Alaskan bullworm episode? And those are just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head. I looked it up. There are a total of 11 times where Bikini Bottom has been destroyed. So if you think the episodes are a continuous story, how the fuck has Bikini Bottom been destroyed 11 times and also rebuilt 11 times? And none of the characters have died or left the city while this is happening. I mean, that would totally happen, right? Right? But even if that were the case, what makes Spongehenge the ultimate ending of Bikini Bottom? What makes it supersede the other endings that have happened?
We're forgetting one small detail, though, and it's what happens at that beginning. If this really was Neptune, or Poseidon, we're to assume that this wipeout was intentional, which leaves us with two questions of why did this happen, and what is the point? Now, my first thought was, oh, maybe Poseidon is just really annoyed with being called Neptune. A lot of this is him getting his revenge on society. But then I was like, no, it's gotta be more than that. In this episode are themes of both religious beliefs and climate change.
At first I was kind of like, that's a bit of a stretch, but now that I've watched the episode and thought about it for a while, yeah, I'll give you that.
I do think the root of the entire episode is in that small conversation at the beginning, especially after further research into the religious lore of Bikini Bottom. But something I noticed, especially after this fish's argument, is that I don't think Neptune was ever a god. Sure, he had godly powers, but that didn't necessarily make him a god himself. In fact, in the first SpongeBob movie, it's made very clear that he's actually a king, and honestly, he's barely that. When he loses his crown and reveals his bald spot, he feels pretty powerless. Sure, he shares the same traits as the mythological god Neptune in that he has a short temper, but there's nothing in this movie or in any of the seasons that suggests King Neptune is a god. In fact, a god is technically ageless, and if King Neptune is going bald, it doesn't add up.
No. So, the first thing with Neptune not actually being a god, this is basically a textbook example of not doing research. I mean, if you Google King Neptune, one of the first things that comes up is a Wikipedia disambiguation page. Disambiguation? We'll go with that. A Wikipedia disambiguation page that's titled King Neptune, and the first line it says, King Neptune may refer to Neptune, the god of the sea, referred to as king by some. His brothers are kings as well. And then if you look down the page, you'll see all the other examples in history of Neptune being referred to as a king outside of SpongeBob. So it's really just history. It's not any choice that they made. And the second thing with the bald spot is that's just a plot point. And I say that because when you're writing a character, you have to make the character have flaws, okay? Because flaws drive conflict, and conflict makes an interesting story. And if Neptune actually was a god character, that would mean he would have no flaws. And that's not interesting. That doesn't make for an interesting character. And on top of that, he wouldn't have any reason to be there, because he wouldn't need anything from SpongeBob and Co. So it's like, I mean, if you've ever written anything or taken any writing classes, then this would be painfully obvious to you, because this is like writing 101. But, I mean, apparently not, which makes me wonder, why are you analyzing stories in the first place if you don't know this basic facet of writing?
Which is my way of saying that she's right. This wind is definitely not King Neptune, but I also don't think it's Poseidon. See, I think Poseidon exists, sure. If I gotta include Sponge on the Run, I will. And it makes the case for him being an actual god in this universe, but that said, that doesn't necessarily mean that this destruction is necessarily caused by Poseidon. Based on that movie, Poseidon just doesn't seem like the type to destroy Bikini Bottom for any particular reason. There's no lore suggesting he wants revenge or that he gets angry. It just doesn't add up.
So, here's where we bring in another tenet of writing, namely Chekhovs Gun. Chekhovs Gun, named after the Russian writer Anton Chekhov. That's a very fun word to say, Chekhov. Chekhov, like it's got punch. Chekhov said in his memoirs, quote, "If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter, it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there." Basically what it means is every detail in a story should be relevant to the story in some way. And if you don't do that, you're opening yourself up to what's called a red herring, which is an element of the story designed to mislead and throw off the reader. Reason I bring all of that up is because that's what he's saying that this entire opening scene is, a massive red herring. Because if it's not Poseidon or Neptune, what else could it be? Oh. Oh no.
So now I'm like, what is this wind? For the record, the wind continues for the next, 3,000 years. It never stops. And I'm just like, where is it coming from? Why is it happening? So I start thinking, Neptune. Oh, Neptune. The actual planet of Neptune is rarely, if ever, referenced in the show.
You've got to be fucking kidding me. Is this a troll? Is this an elaborate fucking troll? There's no way that you're serious. Alright, fucking lay it on me. What do you have to say about Neptune?
Now, I'm not good with space science.
It's astronomy. My god.
But not only is Neptune made mostly of water.
Okay, so you're technically correct about that, but it's really fucking disingenuous calling it water, because when people think of water, we're thinking of liquid water, when in reality, Neptune is made of ice. It's an ice planet. And granted, there are astronomers who think that there is some liquid water under all that ice, but it'd be so pressurized and so hot, for that matter, that it'd be literally impossible for anything to exist down there.
But it's also famously extremely windy. You Google the windiest planet and you literally get Neptune, which, if you know where I'm going with this, is to suggest that this episode is the story of a civilization crumbling physically and mentally as their entire beliefs and existence are questioned, as they have been living on a different planet the entire time.
I refuse. This can't be fucking real. This can't be fucking real. This has to be a fucking troll. Not only have we seen humans in the series and in the movies, but they've been on land, and there are places that we've seen that can only exist on Earth. So, what?
According to Ismail Hamdi, the only way for a god to die is to destroy the significance their names hold.
That's not what that says. Maybe read that one again, because I think you misread it.
In this conversation, the debunking of Neptune as the god of the sea essentially kills Neptune as a god, redefining the name as less of a figure and more as the planet in which these fish live.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
I can't even follow that point, really. It's incomprehensible. So, you're saying that when Neptune died, because of misread Greek mythology found on Korra, Neptune was redefined as the planet? So, the wind was always there, and Neptune was just protecting them from it, so when he died, the wind happened? Or are you saying that when Neptune was redefined as the planet, you mean, the planet they were living on literally changed into Neptune? I mean, I cannot follow this. This is stupidity to the nth fucking degree.
Now, a few things. Something that immediately debunks this is the numerous times SpongeBob and his gang make their way onto land, all of which come across very Earth-like. When you look up planet Earth on the SpongeBob Wikipedia, there's basically a episode for every continent out there. They've been all over the place.
So, why even mention this? What?
A concrete episode we can cite as an explanation for where we are in the universe is Sandy's rocket, where they go into space. In this episode, it's never specifically shown that they leave Earth. They do circle the moon, which is a stretch. Neptune is pretty far from that, but that's not really the point. They get there and they come back. And that said, maybe this isn't our moon. Sandy's size suggests that this is actually way too small.
God, I love points like this. They're so special. So, There probably is a name for this this type of argument, which it's probably out there somewhere, but I like to call it an appeal to simplicity. Basically, it's people not understanding that things in media have been simplified and sort of like truncated for the sake of the audience. One of my favorite examples of this is this Justin Wang video where he talks about this furry art piece which depicts the assassination of Franz Ferdinand.
And actually, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand was just one of many events that led to World War I. How was he supposed to convey years of global political tension through a single drawing, all the nuance of the relationship between Serbia and Russia? I think this line of thinking is why we get so many people who try to make memes that are just big walls of text with no joke, because they don't really get the concept of conveying ideas with simple, easily understood imagery.
Yeah, if they made the moon actually to scale with Sandy, then you wouldn't be able to see her, and that would be bad. So they had to make the moon seem smaller in comparison.
My point is, it's never shown that they're specifically leaving Earth or coming back to it, so this could very well be Neptune the whole time. The thing about this theory is because it's rooted in a false reality, most of the episodes that prove Bikini Bottom takes place on Earth can be debunked because they've been living through a false lens. And also, a lot of those episodes don't add up with this original SpongeBob timeline I'm basing things off of.
Yeah, it doesn't fit with my timeline, so it's a false reality. Yeah, okay. What?
I have several questions.
So, one, this false reality thing, your evidence for it is they're not actually shown leaving Earth. Why the fuck is that the burden of proof? Seems a little arbitrary to me. I mean, they see Earth from the moon. Looks pretty moony to me. Second, I feel like this whole false reality thing is a very hackneyed attempt to shoehorn in continuity to show where there clearly is no continuity. I mean, you see this with fan theories all the time, where it's like, oh, it was all a dream the whole time. Like with fucking Pokemon, the whole Ash is actually in a coma thing. Or like, fuck, what's the other one? Real life, Elon Musk thinks we're in a simulation.
Saying as though SpongeBob's only legacy, a legacy that's lasted thousands of years, was his final suffering. And I think that's it. While I usually like to find the meaning in why this show does what it does, Spongehenge is left ambiguous in a really terrifying way. That Bikini Bottom took place on Neptune all along, and that the citizens died a terrible, mysterious death with the realization of that.
How do you know they died? They could have just left Bikini Bottom for greener pastures. I mean, it's not concrete.
SpongeBob episodes usually leave you with some sort of message, and the message here is that the universe is something more powerful than any form of human connection, and that nature can be violent enough to wipe out entire civilizations if it comes down to that. And that's how SpongeBob ends. So yeah, with all that being said, thanks for watching. Check out Spongehenge and form your own opinion.
Well, I'm glad he gave me the green light to form my own opinion, because my opinion is that was fucking bullshit. There's one other part of the video that I wanted to show, though.
But most of this show, through this lens, can be assumed to be a hallucination or false reality. There's tons of theories that SpongeBob is hallucinating for most of the show.
Ah yes, the drug theory. Look, I'll talk about the drug theory on the next episode. This is already just way too much. So, be sure to like and subscribe and all that bullshit. I'm the Logmuffin, and as always, I'll see you up ahead. God, this is exhausting.